Hello, Internet. So, let's begin with a simple premise. How do free social media apps make money? It's very simple advertisement. The more people that use the app, the more money advertisers are willing to pay to have their content on said app or website. So, how do you get more people to use said app or website? Also simple sensationalism. But when does this sensationalism just become lying? And when does that lying become a problem for society as a whole? Well, when your whole site is just littered with politics and operates under this basic premise, of course. Now, if we were to create an authoritarian structure that only validates a certain viewpoint through censorship that promotes right-think through a social credit-based system, we have China. Sorry, I meant Reddit. I can't possibly imagine why I get those confused sometimes. Let's examine their social credit system real quick and why I like to call it that. Unlike the like and dislike system, the karma system acts as a great way to deter users from having opinions that challenge the narrative of the platform. This system is so intrinsic in Reddit's design that it's the first thing that is displayed when you quickly view a user's profile. This is important because unlike other social media apps, you notice that there is no system that you can conveniently tally up the amount of likes or engagement you've gotten over the years. This means that when a user views your profile, they can take a reasonable guess on how often you use Reddit or how active you're on Reddit, as there's two separate categories for karma. This often reflects your reputation on the app as well, as having high amounts of karma can only be seen as a good thing to the average person who may or may not use social media platforms very often. Because the follower system on Reddit isn't that robust and not really prioritized in any way, unlike Instagram and X, how much karma you have is really the only thing that matters from a social standpoint. Now, for those of you who don't know, there is a word for the informal and unspoken rules for Reddit, and it's called Reddicate. You don't need to spam pride flags on every single subreddit to realize how gay Reddit is when you use lingo like this, but anyway, a theoretical big part of Reddicate is upvoting or downvoting a post or comment based on the quality of its contribution to the discussion itself, not necessarily because you disagree or agree. This obviously gets thrown out the window pretty quickly when there are features you actually get barred from due to your Reddit karma being too low, which can go down when you're downvoted. You see, in theory, it's actually a pretty clever system. Positive karma is supposed to represent, hey, I contribute to conversations in a very positive manner most of the time, regardless of if my opinion is favorable. How it acts in reality, because you literally can't post or comment in some subreddits without having high enough karma, it becomes a game. Now, most of the time, given enough time, users can simply interact normally with subs for a few months to earn enough to be able to post in most subreddits. But what happens when most of the major subreddits that you're allowed to post on with low karma are filled with the greatest divider in human history? Politics. Well, it should be pretty obvious. Echo chambers. It's well known on how and why Reddit is viewed as one of the biggest echo chambers online, and it really boils down to one major problem: moderation of opposing viewpoints. By heavily moderating content that favors only one political and cultural view, you're not only removing potentially rational people and views from the community circle, or those who are willing to change, you're creating a reward structure around repeating the same information. This is very harmful in many ways. By rewarding people for not challenging their own viewpoints or engaging with different viewpoints, you're simply making their critical thinking skills rigid and worldview smaller. Tie this in with emotional escalation and sensationalization, that's a fun word to say, you get your average r/politics user. But more importantly than that, you turn your platform into a pseudo-safe environment, safe for those who agree, but hostile to those who don't. This can turn into something very dangerous when people begin promoting real-world violence, and now these radical opinions virtually have no safety net for rational pushback because you've banned those who would have. That is, until it gets so bad that the website itself has to step in fear of real-world consequences. RIP r/white people Twitter. But now that we have established how Reddit functions in a way that interacting with a large majority of the site requires you to drink the Kool-Aid or stay silent in one way or another, either is fine according to the Chinese government, let's specifically discuss how Reddit takes advantage of this large amount of social force, propaganda, and information control. Now, I don't use the term propaganda lightly. Redditors and Reddit itself will allow the most factually inaccurate articles I've ever read, and not only that, will ban the ones whose facts are inconvenient to their narrative or opinion pieces that don't represent their most morally righteous worldview. Take, for example, this post that we looked at the other day where supposedly the FBI had to cancel a presentation for preventing scams from targeting seniors. If you just do a single Google search, you'll see that it's literally just a lie. And the article even mentioned the Reddit post that I found, and this post now has 119,000 upvotes. And in the original post on r/Ohio, it received 90k upvotes, totaling over 200,000. For a platform that poses as the bastion for truth and warriors against misinformation, it's laughable how often it ends up spreading it due to its own bias. And the funniest part is, it should have been removed because it violates Section D of their title rules, but it would be inconvenient to the narrative, so the moderators will easily just turn a blind eye. Let's look at some more examples. Trump is the most unpopular president in more than 70 years. Sorry, MAGA. Now, before we even tackle the data, let's look at the article Reddit so graciously presented us with. Where is co-president Elon Musk and his snot-nosed band of pubescent hackers when Donald Trump needs them? You'd have thought that with all the whiz-bang computer skills Musk claims his nerd bros possess, they'd have been able to weasel their way into the data collection systems of some big-time pollsters and jack up the numbers for co-commander-in-chief. But I guess not, because it ain't good news. So immediately we begin with a conspiracy that Elon Musk is supposedly changing the data collection for pollsters, because apparently he has the capability of doing that, in favor of Donald Trump, and then they admit that they didn't do it and still run with the original claim. But anyway, two polls show the same low Trump approval rating. Gallup continues, Bill Clinton has the lowest mid-February rating for a newly inaugurated president, which at 51% is 6 points higher than where Trump is now. John Kennedy, 72%, and Jimmy Carter, 71%, were the highest rated at this point in their presidencies. And then I love these modern writers, ouch. 6 percentage points below Clinton puts Trump approval rating at, wait for it, 45%. Now, to most average people reading the title, you'd believe he's already scoring within the 30s in terms of approval rating, but no, he's actually within a 1 to 2% margin of his previous first-term presidency around the same time. Which is actually a miracle if you think about it, considering how drastic the changes he's making are. If there's one thing to know about humans, it's that we don't like change. Unless, of course, it's Americans and we're talking about government reformation. Not only has Trump kept his approval rating during the most polarizing time in American media history, where it seems like everyone is actively working against him, even conservatives, but to prove why this is so silly, let's look at other available data. If we look at the same Gallup poll website where they made the conclusion for the Reddit post, we can see that Joe Biden had only 1% greater average at 42% during his time as president. Keep in mind though, there were two major events that happened during Trump's presidency that we had very limited information on at the time that greatly affected his numbers. The first being COVID, and the second being January 6th. I'm not going to say that Trump handled these two events perfectly, far from it in fact, especially if you view this from a political standpoint optically, but given hindsight is 2020 and we recognize how emotional escalation and low quality coverage occurred around these times, it's no surprise that he took such a big hit in approval ratings. The level of censorship and narrative control around COVID and how little preventative measures were taken to stop an event like January 6th, which the government officials were already warned about by the way, it's shocking that Biden only beat him by 1%. I mean, seriously, they convinced us he was mentally sound for 4 years straight. Had this been Trump, he would have been impeached for senility or something. Now, both of their approval ratings aren't good. Nobody's bragging at being in the high 30s or low 40s. But let's take a look at some more damning data from Project 538. In terms of favorability from 2021 to 2025, Donald Trump is consistently reaching an all-time high, and if we contrast this with Joe Biden's favorability, I think we get a completely different story, and don't even get me started on Kamala Harris. If I was clueless and just looked at the graph, I would have thought Joe Biden and Kamala were also accused of an insurrection. But if we look at their approval ratings as well, they also tell more or less the same story. But keep in mind, Nixon was also president during these 70 years, and so was George W. Bush, who scored a 25% approval rating by the end of 2008. So even if we throw out all the previous data I just mentioned, it's still a complete lie, and the only way it isn't is if you just look at the month of February for every president's first 2 months, and that's only true if you only look at one Gallup poll. Sorry, if there's one thing that irks me the most, it's when people use data to give the most disgusting distortion of the truth. Trump is framed to be extremely divisive and polarizing. We all know this, and I can agree in some instances it's true. But with all the lies and constant propaganda, it's very difficult to know how people would really feel if they were given unbiased reporting. Joe Biden was literally against desegregating public schools and teamed up with Jesse Helms, a segregationist senator from my home state of North Carolina. He also said, "I don't want my kids growing up in a racial jungle," in reference to the 1994 crime bill, and said most recently, "If you don't vote for me, you ain't black." If this dude didn't have a D next to his name, people would think he'd belong in the Trump cabinet. The same people who talk about Trump being racist will vote for Biden or Hillary without a second thought. And hell, I even question these recent polls because in 2016, we saw articles like this constantly and were told that Harris had a 50-50 chance of winning. Is anything even real anymore? Let me give you one final example of what I mean. Here we have an article that says UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, I don't know how to say it, corrects VP JD Vance on free speech in the United Kingdom. Now let's watch the clip.
I said what I said, which is that we do have, of course, a special relationship with our friends in the UK and also with some of our European allies, but we also know that there have been infringements on free speech that actually affect not just the British, of course, what the British do in their own country is up to them, but also affect American technology companies and by extension American citizens. So that is something that we'll talk about today at lunch.
We've had free speech for a very, very long time in the United Kingdom, and it will last for a very, very long time. Well, no, I mean, certainly we wouldn't want to reach across US citizens, and we don't, and that's absolutely right. But in relation to free speech in the UK, I'm very proud of our history.
Yes, we've had free speech for a very long time. This is just unequivocally false, and let me cite real legislation to prove my point. In 1986, the Public Order Act was created to abolish the common law offenses of riot, root, unlawful assembly, and affray, to control the stirring up of racial hatred. The original text was pretty reasonable as it was mainly referring to real violence or threatening actions and specifically excluded the use of words alone as a means of inciting violence, but its repeal in 2001 added section 18(1)A and B, and in 2024 section 19(1)A and B, section 20(1)A and B, and section 21(1)A and B, and in this order, criminalizes threatening, abusive, or insulting words or behavior intended to stir up racial hatred, makes it illegal to publish, distribute, or share written, recorded, or online material that could incite racial hatred, includes plays, films, or public performances, making it an offense to include content that incites racial hatred, and criminalizes possession of hate-inciting material with the intent to distribute or publish it. Now let's make this absolutely clear. In no instance in America would the federal government be allowed to take any action against you for doing these things. It is literally illegal to send grossly offensive messages according to the Communications Act in the UK. Like it or not, hate speech is free speech in America, as long as it doesn't threaten anyone or incite violence. I don't know who the Prime Minister is trying to score points with, but we all know what happened to Count Dankula when he, in his own dwelling, according to the UK, jokingly made his dog do the 1920s Italian saluto romano. Count Dankula is not a racist, he is a comedian. We have his entire internet history to prove this. But regardless, even if every lie was true, this should not have been a crime. Nobody in America with an understanding of the Constitution would allow someone who did this to be arrested. You should be allowed to be retarded. And fun fact, by the way, racism didn't really exist like this back during the medieval period, or more broadly the 5th to 15th century in Europe. You were primarily discriminated against based on your religion and culture, not skin color. But anyway, this post got 53,000 upvotes, and it just goes to show how delusional these people are. Like, just read this comment. This person has attempted to download RAM more than once, I promise you. But this video is getting pretty long and I'll be going into these topics, probably karma, in my next video, but I hope you guys like this new style of video. I'll probably structure my channel a lot better as well, and talk specifically about the comments section, and make it a video series so we can analyze more in depth the discussions going on in these posts. I want to hold myself more accountable to explaining and giving my reasoning for why these Redditors are wrong, but as you see, it takes a lot more time and context that people aren't willing to dive into. I think in the long run though, it will benefit my channel more and my own personal knowledge, so as usual, if I got anything wrong or could add more context to any particular topic, let me know down in the comments as I'm not perfect. Like, comment, subscribe, and on to the patrons. So thank you so much guys, we have 3 new members, one being a based god cheese stick fanatic who is actually an OG member of the channel. I forgot how long he's been watching, but he was here way before I even blew up, I think. And to our 2 new base certified members, Sweaty Jorts and Kitsy. Now on to our base gods. Thank you so much to XX Schisms XX, your local Inquisitor, and Triple X Medic. And thank you to our base legends, Kado, Yodu Imiya, Mr. Praria, Andrew P, and GOL1912. And thank you to our super based members, Shadow Dow, Devin Dekron, Contranock, Redzi, Aziz Deglee, Pim Tool, Joseph Miller, Zach Orange, P. Remgar, Wyatt P, Seth M, Mr. Shonk, Name 345, Garrison Painter, and Justin R. And thank you to our base certified members, BoneBlayout762, Crowbon, Joker Gaming, Nathan Quinn, Matthew M, Duwop Diggy, Blom Green, Tom, Matthew Armstrong, Thomas Lehman, Rezu Jordan, Arcturus 51, Worms, Serbian Sicko 92, Terry, Turkey Dog, Easy Joe, Levy Velasco, Crow Eater 1836, Filler, Hilday, Joe Billy, Crocodilus, Wes, Snidler, Ka Ghosted, Clan of One, Luca Bro, Sean S, 8 Monkey, Borovka V Florianic 3000, and Alana K, and I hope to see you guys tomorrow. Peace.